Hi, my name is Emma. I'm 29, and up until recently, I thought that no matter what happened in life, family was supposed to be your safe place. The people who would always have your back? I was wrong. The past year has taught me that family isn't about shared bloodlines or history, it's about respect and boundaries. Unfortunately, I had to learn that the hard way. I grew up in a middle-class household in Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Nancy and David, always prided themselves on being a close-knit family. They used to say that family sticks together through thick and thin, but it became clear over the years that those words didn't apply equally to everyone. I have an older brother, Liam. He's 4 years older than me and has always been the golden child. You know the type, the one who can do no wrong in the eyes of our parents. Liam was charming, popular, and always seemed to glide through life effortlessly. Me, I was the responsible one, the practical one, the one who helped around the house and did well in school without much fanfare. It wasn't that my parents were overtly cruel to me. It was more subtle than that. Growing up, I would notice how Liam always got the best gifts at Christmas, or how my achievements were met with a polite, "That's nice, dear," while Liam's smallest accomplishment was celebrated with enthusiasm. It hurt, but I told myself it didn't matter. I didn't need the fanfare. I was independent, self-sufficient. After college, I landed a good job at a marketing firm and started making decent money. I didn't move out right away because my parents insisted I stay to save for the future. It seemed practical at the time, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with them. So, I stayed in the basement suite, which I had turned into a cozy little apartment. I paid rent, $2,600 a month, to help with household expenses, plus I covered groceries and utilities. It was a lot, but I didn't mind. Family helps family, right? Things took a turn when Liam married Becky. She was sweet and they seemed happy, but as soon as their first child, Jacob, was born, my parents' attention shifted entirely. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Liam being the favorite, it was about Liam giving them grandkids. "Oh, we finally have a little one to spoil," my mom would gush. I was happy for them, but I couldn't help feeling like I was fading into the background. Still, I kept supporting my parents financially. Liam and Becky weren't in the best financial situation, so my parents often helped them out. I didn't complain. It wasn't my business how they managed their money, but things started to shift when Liam lost his job. He'd been working as a regional manager for a retail chain that went under, and suddenly, their financial situation became dire. I remember the night everything changed. I had just returned home from a long work trip, exhausted and craving a hot shower and my bed. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was off. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. Mom had that concerned look she gets when she's about to drop a bombshell. "Emma, we need to talk," she started. I dropped my bag by the door and sat down, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "What's going on?" Mom glanced at Dad before continuing. "Liam and Becky are struggling right now. They need a place to stay while they get back on their feet." I felt my heart sink. "Where are they going to stay?" "In the basement suite," she said, smiling like it was a reasonable solution. "It's perfect for them. Separate from the main house, there is lots of space for the kids." I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "My basement suite? Where am I supposed to go?" Dad finally spoke, though his voice was quiet. "We've set up the hobby room for you. It's cozy. You'll have plenty of space." The hobby room? A glorified closet filled with Mom's sewing machine, stacks of fabric, and holiday decorations. It wasn't even a bedroom. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, hoping this was some bizarre joke. Mom's tone shifted, becoming more defensive. "It's only temporary, Emma. Besides, this is our house. We need to make decisions that benefit the family as a whole." There it was, the classic, "It's our house" line. I sat there in stunned silence as they patted themselves on the back for being so generous to Liam. My comfort, my space, didn't matter. I spent that night packing up my belongings. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I stared at the basement suite I had called home for years. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Shelves full of books, cozy blankets, my favorite candles. Now, all of it was being ripped away from me to accommodate Liam and his family. The worst part? They didn't even ask. There was no conversation, no family meeting, no, "Emma, how do you feel about this?" It was decided for me. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't stay. Not in the hobby room, not in a house where I was clearly just a supporting character in someone else's story. So, I made a plan. For the 2 weeks I had off between work trips, I booked an affordable, all-inclusive resort in the Florida Keys. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheaper than paying $600 for a basement suite I no longer had. Plus, it came with peace and quiet, two things I desperately needed. When I told my parents about my plan, they barely reacted. Mom even said, "Well, if that's what you need to do." It wasn't until I left that the real drama began. 2 days into my stay at the resort, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Mom, hey Emma, where's the money for rent and groceries this month? We're counting on it to help support Liam and the kids." I stared at the message, speechless. Surely she wasn't serious. I called her back immediately. "Mom, I don't live there anymore. Why would I pay rent?" Her voice was stern. "Because we're still a family, Emma. You know we're all in a bind right now. Liam needs that space more than you do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you gave away my space. I'm not even there." Dad got on the phone then, his voice more forceful than usual. "You can't just leave your family hanging like this. We raised you better than that." It was like talking to a wall. No matter what I said, they kept hammering the same point, that I was selfish, abandoning my family, and that Liam's struggles were my responsibility too. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't about helping my family anymore. It was about control. I thought going on that trip would give me the space I needed to clear my head. I had planned to relax by the beach, sip on some cocktails, and pretend for a while that the chaos back home didn't exist. But my phone buzzed constantly. I told myself I wouldn't check it, but the guilt crept in, gnawing at me until I gave in. Mom's messages kept coming. "Mom, you're really hurting your father with this behavior? Mom, Liam is doing his best, but it's hard with 2 little kids. Can't you help just a little?" Dad wasn't much of a texter, but when he did chime in, it was always the same guilt-laden rhetoric. "Dad, you know we've always supported you. We need you to step up now." I tried ignoring them, but then came the phone calls. They wouldn't stop. Finally, out of frustration, I answered one. "Hello?" Mom's voice was immediately on the other end, strained and accusatory. "Emma, why are you doing this? We raised you better than this." "Doing what, Mom?" "Taking a break from the insanity you dumped on me without warning, giving myself a moment to breathe." "You abandoned us," she snapped. "You know Liam needs help. We're struggling here, and you're off on some vacation." I took a deep breath. "Mom, you kicked me out of my space. You didn't ask. You didn't even warn me. You just made a decision that completely upended my life. And now you want me to keep paying for a house I don't even live in?" Her voice softened, but it was the same manipulative tone she always used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. "It's not like that. We all have to make sacrifices for family. You know that?" "No," I said firmly. "What you did wasn't a sacrifice. It was theft. You stole my space and my peace of mind. You didn't even consider how I'd feel." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, the weight of the conversation sinking in. "Emma," she finally said, "we need you. The kids need you. Liam's struggling." I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. "I've done enough. I've given enough. It's time you and Liam figure things out without making me the scapegoat." I hung up and threw my phone onto the bed. My hands were shaking, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in a long time. Empowerment. The guilt was still there, gnawing at the edges, but I knew I had taken a step in the right direction. For once, I was standing up for myself. The next morning, I woke up to find a dozen missed calls and texts, but I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went to the beach, sat by the water, and let the waves drown out the noise of my family's demands. Returning home after my trip, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was calmer, more centered, but the reality of my situation hadn't changed. My family was relentless. As soon as I walked into my apartment, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. "Mom, Emma, we need to talk. You can't keep avoiding us." Ignoring the message, I unpacked my suitcase and tried to settle in. I thought the worst was over, that they'd eventually let it go. But deep down, I knew better. My family had a way of clinging to their expectations and pushing boundaries until they got what they wanted. 2 days later, I got an unexpected knock at my door. My stomach sank as I peeked through the peephole. Standing there, with a strained expression, was Liam. I opened the door cautiously. "Liam, what are you doing here?" he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Emma, we need to talk. I crossed my arms. I'm not sure there's much to talk about. Come on, he said, his tone softer. I know things got out of hand. Let's just clear the air. Reluctantly, I let him in. He sat on my couch, looking around my apartment as if seeing it for the first time. Nice place, he said, trying to make small talk. Liam, cut to the chase. Why are you here? He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. Look, I know you're upset. Mom and Dad told me what happened. I get it. You feel like you've been pushed aside, but you've got to understand, this isn't just about you. It's about family. There it was again, that word, family, as if it was some magic spell that erased all wrongdoing. Liam, do you even hear yourself? You're sitting here trying to guilt me into paying for a house I don't live in. Do you realize how insane that sounds? He sighed again, shaking his head. It's not about the money, it's about keeping things together. Mom and Dad are struggling. They're getting older, and the house needs repairs. I'm just trying to help them. And you think I haven't been helping? I shot back. I've been paying rent, groceries, utilities, everything, for years. While you've been what? Living comfortably without a care in the world? His expression darkened. That's not fair. No, Liam. What's not fair is you and Mom and Dad expecting me to keep sacrificing my peace, my stability, for your mistakes. I'm done being your safety net. Silence hung between us. He looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know you felt this way, he finally muttered. Of course you didn't, because no one ever asked how I felt. You all just assumed I'd keep giving and giving, without ever stopping to think about what it was costing me. He stood up, pacing the room. So what now? You're just cutting us off? Walking away from your family? I'm setting boundaries, Liam. Boundaries that should have been there from the start. I'm not cutting anyone off, but I'm not going to be used anymore. He stopped pacing and looked at me, a hint of regret in his eyes. I never meant to make you feel used. Maybe not intentionally, but that doesn't change the fact that you did. After a long pause, he nodded. Okay, I'll talk to Mom and Dad. Maybe we've all been leaning on you too much. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But a part of me knew it wouldn't be that easy. Liam might have been willing to back off, but my parents? They were a different story. Sure enough, the next day, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just my mom. It was my extended family, too. Uncle Gary. Hey, Emma. I heard about what's going on. Family is important. Don't let this divide you all. Aunt Linda. Sweetheart, your parents are hurting. Maybe you should try to see things from their perspective. The messages kept coming. Cousins, distant relatives, and even family friends chimed in with their 2 cents. It felt like a coordinated effort to guilt me into submission. And then, the final straw, a family group email from Mom. Subject, family meeting. Emma, we've decided to have a family meeting on Sunday at 3 p.m. It's important that you join. We need to resolve this as a family. I stared at the email, my heart pounding. A family meeting? Seriously? I debated ignoring it, but deep down, I knew they wouldn't stop until I faced them head on. Sunday came faster than I expected. I logged into the video call, my stomach in knots. The screen filled with familiar faces. Mom, Dad, Liam, Aunt Linda, Uncle Gary, Cousin Rachel, and even some family friends I hadn't seen in years. Mom started the meeting, her voice calm but firm. Emma, we're all here because we care about you. We're worried about the choices you're making. I bit my tongue, letting her finish. We understand that you've been feeling overwhelmed, but family sticks together. We've all had to make sacrifices, and now it's your turn to step up. I unmuted myself, my hands trembling. I've been stepping up for years, Mom. I've given more than my fair share. But when I needed support, when I needed to be asked how I felt, you all ignored me. Aunt Linda chimed in. Emma, sweetie, don't let pride get in the way of family. It's not pride, I snapped. It's self-respect. I've been treated like a convenience my entire life. I'm done being the family ATM. The room fell silent. Mom looked visibly shaken, while Dad stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. Finally, Liam spoke. Emma's right. We've been unfair to her. Everyone turned to him shocked. I've leaned on Emma too much. We all have. It's time we take responsibility for our own lives. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. But I wasn't naive. I knew this was just the beginning of a long journey toward setting boundaries and reclaiming my life. After the family meeting, I thought things might start to settle. Liam's unexpected support had caught me off guard, and for a moment, I believed my parents might reflect on his words and reconsider their behavior. But I underestimated their determination to hold on to the control they'd always had. The very next morning, I received an email from Mom. Subject: "We need to discuss this further. Emma, I understand that you feel overwhelmed, but you're still part of this family. We've always supported you, and now we need you to help us through a difficult time. Please reconsider your stance. Let's meet in person to talk this through." I read the email twice, my frustration growing. She wasn't hearing me. She wasn't even trying to understand. To her, this was still about obligations and responsibilities, not about my right to set boundaries. I closed my laptop without replying. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I wasn't going to let her pull me back into that cycle of manipulation. But my resolve was tested again later that week when Dad showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, and there was a sadness in his eyes that tugged at my heartstrings. "Dad?" I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He sighed heavily. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting him in. He sat down on my couch, looking around my apartment with a distant expression. "This is a nice place," he said softly. "You've made a good life for yourself." "Thanks," I replied, sitting across from him. "But I'm guessing you didn't come here to compliment my apartment." He chuckled bitterly. "No, I didn't." For a moment, we sat in silence, the tension thick in the air. Finally, he spoke. "Your mom's been really upset. She's not handling this well." "I know," I said. "But Dad, I need her to understand that I'm not a child anymore. I'm not her personal safety net. I have my own life, my own needs." He nodded slowly. "I get that, but it's hard for her. She's always seen you as the responsible one, the one who keeps everything together. And that's exactly the problem," I said. "I can't keep being that person. It's exhausting." Dad sighed again, rubbing his temples. "So what do we do now? How do we fix this?" "I don't know if we can fix it," I admitted. "Not unless everyone is willing to respect my boundaries." He looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he stood up. "I'll talk to your mom," he said, "but I can't promise she'll listen. That's all I'm asking for," I said quietly. As he left, I felt a strange mix of hope and sadness. I wasn't sure if anything would change, but at least I'd finally made my feelings clear. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with another guilt-laden message, but there was nothing. I tried to focus on work, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, Dad's talk with Mom had worked. Then, on Saturday morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. It was Mom. I hesitated before opening the door, bracing myself for whatever emotional onslaught she was about to unleash. "Hi, Mom," I said cautiously. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She sat on the couch, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, "about what you said during the meeting, and about what your dad said." I sat down across from her, staying silent. I wanted to hear her out. "You're right," she admitted, her voice trembling. "We've leaned on you too much. I've leaned on you too much. I didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you." I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't expected this. "Not from her. I've always seen you as the strong one," she continued, "the responsible one. And I guess I thought you didn't mind carrying some of the weight. But I see now that it wasn't fair to you." "Mom," I said softly, "I never minded helping, but it started to feel like it wasn't helping anymore. It was an expectation. And that's what hurts." She nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Emma. Truly. I never meant to make you feel that way." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Things didn't magically resolve overnight. There were still difficult conversations to be had and boundaries to be reinforced. But that moment with my mom was a turning point. Over the next few weeks, my family began to adjust. Liam found a better job and moved his family into their own place. Mom and Dad started managing their finances more responsibly, no longer relying on me as their backup plan, and I learned to say no when I needed to prioritize my own well-being without guilt. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still moments of tension, still traces of old habits trying to resurface. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life, and that was enough. Things seemed to be improving with my family after that heartfelt conversation with Mom. I allowed myself to hope that we were turning a corner, that they had finally accepted my boundaries and realized how much damage they had done. For a few weeks, there was peace. No frantic calls, no guilt-tripping messages, just silence. But deep down, I knew it was too good to last. It started with a phone call from Aunt Linda. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but seeing her name pop up on my screen filled me with dread. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Emma, sweetheart, it's been too long." Aunt Linda's voice chirped on the other end. "How are you?" "I'm doing well," I replied, wary. "How about you?" "Oh, we're fine," she said, brushing off the pleasantries. "Listen, your mom's been really upset lately. She feels terrible about everything that's happened. I just think maybe you could reach out to her again? Let her know you still care." I sighed, closing my eyes. "Here we go again." "I've already spoken to Mom," I said, keeping my tone even. "We've had our talks, and I've made my boundaries clear." Yes, of course," Aunt Linda said quickly. "But you know how family is. Sometimes they need a little more time to adjust. Your mom is just worried. She's always seen you as her rock." I clenched my jaw. There it was again, that word, rock. Responsible, the one everyone leaned on. "Aunt Linda, I've been my family's rock for years," I said, my voice firm. "But I can't keep sacrificing my own well-being to keep everyone else afloat. It's not fair." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand that, Emma. I really do. But your mom and dad are struggling. They've always done their best for you. Have they?" I countered, because it feels like they've always done what was best for them and expected me to clean up the mess. Aunt Linda sighed heavily. "I'm just saying, family is important. Don't let pride get in the way." "It's not pride," I said, my frustration bubbling over. "It's self-preservation." We ended the call soon after, with Aunt Linda promising to check in again. I hung up feeling exhausted and drained. Why couldn't they just let me be? The next blow came a few days later in the form of a text from Liam. "Liam, hey Emma, I heard from Mom and Dad that things aren't great. I know they've been tough on you, but maybe we can all sit down and talk things out. I hate seeing the family like this." I stared at the message for a long time, torn between anger and sadness. Liam had always been the peacemaker, the one trying to bridge the gaps, but I couldn't ignore how complicit he'd been in the past. I typed out a response. Me, "Liam, I appreciate the sentiment. But we've already talked. I've made my boundaries clear. I'm not interested in rehashing the same conversations over and over." His reply came almost immediately. "Liam, I get that, but you know how Mom is. She's stubborn. She's not going to stop until she feels like things are okay again." I set my phone down, shaking my head. Why was it always on me to make things right? Why was it my responsibility to soothe everyone else's feelings? I decided to ignore the message. I needed to focus on my own life, my work, my friends, my future. I couldn't keep getting dragged back into the same toxic cycle, but my family wasn't done with me yet. The final straw came when I received a letter in the mail. It was from my parents. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling slightly. Inside was a typed letter, neatly folded, along with a few printed photos. I unfolded the letter and began to read. "Dear Emma, we've been trying to reach you, but it seems like you're avoiding us. We understand that you're upset, and we've taken time to reflect on everything that's happened. We want to apologize if we've made you feel like your contributions weren't appreciated. That was never our intention. But we also want you to know that family is forever. No matter what happens, we will always be here for you, and we hope you'll do the same for us. Please don't shut us out. Let's work through this together. Love, Mom and Dad." I set the letter down, my chest tightening. The words were carefully chosen, dripping with emotional manipulation. It wasn't a real apology. It was another attempt to reel me back in. The photos included were of my nephews, Jason and Liam's kids, smiling brightly at the camera. A handwritten note on the back of one photo read, "Jason misses you. He keeps asking when Aunt Emma is coming to visit." Tears welled up in my eyes. I loved those kids. I missed them, but I couldn't let myself be guilted into returning to a toxic situation. I folded the letter and photos back into the envelope and placed it on my kitchen counter. I needed time to think. That evening, I called Jessica, one of my closest friends. "Hey, Jess," I said when she picked up. "Do you have time to talk?" "Of course," she replied. "What's up?" I told her about the letter, the photos, and the relentless pressure from my family. She listened quietly, letting me vent. "They're never going to stop, are they?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jessica sighed. "It doesn't sound like it, but Emma, you've done everything you can to set boundaries. You can't control how they react. All you can do is control how you respond." Her words hit me hard. She was right. I couldn't change my family's behavior, but I could choose to protect myself. "Thanks, Jess," I said softly. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime," she replied. "And remember, you're not alone. You've got people who care about you." I smiled, feeling a little lighter. It was a reminder I desperately needed. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of clarity. I sat down at my kitchen table, pulled out a piece of paper, and began to write. "Dear Mom and Dad, I've read your letter, and I appreciate the effort you've made to reach out. But I need you to understand something. My boundaries are not up for negotiation. I love you both. I always will. But I can't keep sacrificing my mental health and well-being to meet your expectations. I need space to live my own life, to build my own happiness. Please respect that. Emma." I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and addressed it to my parents. It wasn't the emotional reunion they were hoping for, but it was honest. It was me standing up for myself. As I walked to the mailbox, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done everything I could to make them understand. The rest was up to them. No matter what happened next, I knew I had made the right choice. For the first time in years, I felt free. After sending that letter, I felt a strange sense of finality. It was like I had finally laid everything on the table and had nothing left to prove. I was done trying to appease everyone, and I was ready to move forward, no matter how hard it might be. The days after were quieter, but the silence wasn't the peaceful kind I had hoped for. It was more like a tense stillness, a waiting period before the next wave would come crashing in. I didn't hear from my parents for a few days. At first, I thought maybe they were giving me space, respecting the boundaries I had set. But then, a week later, my phone rang, and I saw Mom's name flash across the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure what to expect. What could they say to me now? "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma?" Mom's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "We've been talking." I waited, holding my breath. I had no idea where this conversation would go. "I just want you to know that we love you," she continued, "and we want to make things right. I don't want to lose my daughter over all of this." I felt a lump in my throat. As much as I had tried to distance myself from their emotional manipulation, hearing her say those words stirred something deep inside me. "I love you too, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "But I can't keep doing this. I need you to understand that I've been giving for so long. I can't keep sacrificing my life for everyone else. I need my own space to live the way I want." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I knew she was processing my words. For once, I wasn't going to take them back. I wasn't going to apologize for wanting a life of my own. Finally, Mom spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. "I know, Emma. I know. I just didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you. I didn't mean for you to feel like you were always the one carrying the weight." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "I just need you to respect my boundaries. If you can do that, we can move forward. But I can't keep going back to the way things were. I need to live for myself now." "I understand," she said, her voice cracking. "We'll respect that, Emma. I promise. We're going to try and do better." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being heard. It wasn't the resolution I'd hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a shift in my family. Mom and Dad were making more of an effort to manage their own finances. They weren't leaning on me for everything anymore, and they seemed more willing to listen when I said no. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Liam, too, seemed to be coming to terms with the situation. He had been quiet for a while, but he eventually reached out to me, asking if I wanted to go grab lunch. I agreed, needing to clear the air between us. We met at a small cafe, and he was the first to speak. "I want to apologize, Emma. I didn't realize how much I had been relying on you. I thought I was helping, But I see now that I wasn't. I looked at him, taking in the sincerity in his eyes. It's not just you, Liam. It's been everyone, including me. I've always felt like I had to carry the weight of the family, and it got to be too much. He nodded. I get it now, and I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I'll do my part, I promise. I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in months. Thank you, Liam. That means a lot. As the weeks went by, I started to feel a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. I was still working hard, still building my career, but now it was for me. I wasn't giving everything I had to people who wouldn't appreciate it. I wasn't letting guilt or obligation dictate my choices. It wasn't always easy, though. There were moments when I felt that old pull, that need to help, to fix things for everyone else. But every time I felt that pull, I reminded myself of the boundaries I had set. I reminded myself that I deserved to be happy too, and it worked. Slowly but surely, I began to see changes. My family was still learning, still adjusting, but I was no longer the person they could depend on to bail them out. I had my own life now. I had my own priorities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. One evening, a few months after that phone call with Mom, I received a message from her. It wasn't long, just a simple text. I'm proud of you, Emma. You've always been strong, and now you're taking care of yourself. I love you. I stared at the message for a while, feeling a mix of emotions. There was still a part of me that longed for the closeness we had once shared, but I knew that what I had done, what I was doing, was the right thing for me. I wasn't angry anymore, but I had learned to let go. I typed back, I love you too, Mom. Thank you. For the first time, I felt like I was living on my own terms. No more guilt, no more expectations that weren't mine to carry. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, how to live for myself, and that, more than anything, felt like freedom. I finally understood that it wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about choosing myself, choosing to not be anyone else's safety net, choosing to live my own life without apology. And for once, that was enough. The end of this chapter was just the beginning of a new one. I had learned how to stand up for myself, how to reclaim my life, and how to find peace within my own choices. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that no matter what happened with my family, I had finally found the strength to walk my own path.